Did you know that the noob box, which is a shithole of a tactic frequently used alongside pikes, is actually a historically viable formation and not just an exploit? Oh well, let's talk about spear units in Total War Rome 2, starting off with pikes. Do you want to roleplay as Alexander the Great? Maybe just have an easy time bullying the AI? Then pikes are for you. Coming with 256 men in each unit, these guys wield massive sarissas, allowing them to keep their enemies away, dealing damage to them while still staying safe. This obviously makes them excellent against infantry and anything approaching them from the front really. However, historically the downside to these enormous sarissas was their weight. It required both hands just to gain some form of control over the weapon, denying the use of large shields. They did have these small ones strapped to their arms, but it didn't cover much apart from their arm and part of their chest, making them extremely vulnerable to skirmisher fire. Especially slingers, as their long range and high ammo count can melt pikes before they can ever become useful. That's just an endgame thing, not necessarily a historical fact. Pikes are mostly known for their defensive capabilities, to hold bridges, block streets, or create an impenetrable front line. This is certainly also how you should use them against the AI. Versus a player, it is slightly different. An actual human typically knows the strength of pikes and will just move around to avoid them altogether. So against a player, I'd always recommend keeping pikes in reserve and then deploying them once the actual battle has started. This way they will be useful until your opponent realizes what is going on. If you want to be a bit more immersed, you can always place your pikes on the flanks. Use them as a kind of deterrent screening unit, encouraging the enemy to attack your weaker center. Once lured in, you can then turn your units and encircle the enemy, just like at the Battle of Cannae. There is also this shorter form of pikemen I quickly want to talk about. Basically, they have a greater charge speed compared to regular pikes, meaning you can rush them into combat out of formation, getting that extra bonus. And after that has been applied, you'll just tell your pikes to form a pike front line, and as they have shorter pikes, they can easily push back the enemy units. Furthermore, as they are so strong, this means they can win against almost any infantry apart from other actual long pikes in a one-on-one. With that said, just like any other unit in the game, pikes are especially vulnerable to rear charges. In general, just getting outflanked is horrible for them, as this will significantly diminish their morale. As mentioned, this can also be said when it comes to other units such as Hoplites and Elite Spears, who in many ways act similarly to the Pikemen. Best suited for the front line and holding choke points. Their main advantage over the Pikemen is just their better shields, which allows them to survive a skirmish barrage longer than pikes can. Nevertheless, Hoplites are easily better suited for the Cannae tactic I mentioned for the Pikemen, where you put them on the flanks and then have better cover from being outnumbered due to their larger shields. There are many different formations for a spear unit that is not a pike. A phalanx, shield wall, hollow square, testudo, repel cavalry, or defensive formation. The phalanx gives you increased frontal defense, but at the cost of movement speed and attack. This is typically found within the Hellenic factions through units such as Hoplites. The shield wall has the same concept, but with increased defense overall and not just from the front. Defensive formation also adds an improved morale and is thus a better formation than the other two. It doesn't even lower the movement speed. But as those units with the ability are so slow anyway, it doesn't really matter. The hollow square grants you improved defense against cavalry and flanking infantry, but at the cost of reduced attack rate and being unable to move. The repel cavalry ability does basically the same, but only against cavalry, and without the flanking protection. It keeps its usual attack rate though, which certainly is a bonus. Lastly, we also have the Roman testudo, which as we all probably can guess gives missile protection at the expense of being unable to attack. There's also this last category of spears I like to call the light category. In general, these are the kinds of units with 3 movement speed, and more often than not 300 men in their unit. Thorios, for example, although they're not exactly considered light, not all the time, but sometimes. They are excellent to act as an anti-cavalry unit or overall flanking protection. With their 3 speed, they are still somewhat fast enough to go on the offensive if any opportune moment appears. They can also act as a decent reserve unit, running to whatever place you need them the most. Another option could be to add them together with the cavalry. With a spear unit fighting alongside your cavalry, every engagement should go in your favor. So long your enemy doesn't do the same, that is. But that is all from me regarding spear units. They are great and I usually recommend at least 3 spears per army. There is no real cap to the total amount depending on your playstyle. Just leave some space for flanking units, cavalry and skirmishers, okay? I beg you. That should be all from me today, so thank you very much for watching, and until the next time everyone, goodbye.